The notification came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, while Laurel was already in bed with the lights off and her phone face down on the nightstand. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd been lying there doing what she'd been doing most nights for the past 3 weeks, listening for the sound of the garage door, counting the minutes, telling herself she was being paranoid. The screen lit up through the cover of her pillow. Marriott Bonvoy. Congratulations. Your account just earned 2,840 points from a recent stay. View your reservation history. She stared at it for a long time. Her account, their shared account, the one she'd set up years ago because she handled the travel bookings, the points, all of it. She opened the app. The stay had checked out that morning. 2 nights. The Marriott on Riverwalk downtown, 40 minutes from their house. Her husband Troy had told her he was in Columbus for a client presentation. She set the phone back down. She didn't cry. She didn't call him. She just lay there in the dark, feeling something cold and very precise move through her chest. Like someone had opened a window she didn't know existed. She thought, I need to know everything before I do anything. That was the thing about Laurel Beckett that most people didn't understand about her. She was an architect. Not the glamorous kind, not the kind on magazine covers holding blueprints in front of glass towers. She did residential work, custom homes. She spent her days thinking about load-bearing walls, about where the stress would be, about how a structure holds together and where it fails. She knew, better than most people, that you don't walk into a building you suspect is compromised and just start pushing on walls. You survey first, you document. You build your case with evidence before you make a single move. She opened her laptop and started. She'd had access to their joint credit card statements for years. She'd never looked at them closely. She handled the points and the travel. Troy handled the day-to-day expenses, and they had a system that had worked fine for 11 years. It had worked fine because she'd trusted him. She understood that now. The system had not been working fine. She had just not been paying attention. The statements went back 27 months. She read every line. The restaurant charges came first. Places she'd never been to. Charged on nights Troy had said he was working late or at client dinners. She knew his client dinner restaurants. He had a rotation, the same 4 or 5 places he took people. This was different. Wine bars she'd never heard of. A jazz club in the warehouse district. A sushi omakase that charged $210 per person. She cross-referenced dates against her own calendar. 3 of those nights she'd been home alone. One of them had been their anniversary. He'd told her he had a flight that couldn't be moved. She closed the laptop at 3 a.m. and put it on his side of the bed. She didn't sleep. She didn't confront him. That was the second thing people wouldn't have expected of her. Her best friend Audalys, who had known her since college, would have expected fireworks. Audalys said Laurel had a temper like a gas stove, doesn't show anything until suddenly everything's on fire. But this didn't feel like that. This felt like something that required patience, something structural. Troy came home from Columbus the next evening with a garment bag over his shoulder, and a box of Jenny's ice cream from the airport because he knew she liked it. She watched him set it on the counter and thought about the Marriott points and smiled and said thank you. She was very good at smiling. She started paying attention differently after that. Not obsessively. She wasn't following him, wasn't checking his phone while he slept. She was just noticing things she'd stopped noticing. When had he started keeping his phone screen down on the table during dinner? When had he stopped asking about her projects at work? When had she stopped expecting him to ask? She thought about a house she'd renovated 3 years ago, a Victorian in Midtown that the owners had bought without an inspection. Beautiful bones, they'd said, great bones. They were right. There were also 17 years of water damage inside the walls that nobody had bothered to look for. She called her attorney on a Wednesday morning from her office parking garage. Her attorney was a woman named Frances, who Laurel had met at a charity gala 4 years ago and had kept her card because she seemed like the kind of woman you'd want in your corner. She was. Frances listened to everything Laurel had found, asked 3 very specific questions, and then said quietly and without drama, "This is enough, but if you want more I can recommend someone." The someone was a man named Dwight, who worked out of a one-room office above a dry cleaner's in Buckhead and looked like someone's retired uncle. He handed her a folder 6 days later. She sat in the small chair across from his desk and opened it. The woman's name was Amber. 29 years old. She worked in marketing at a firm 2 floors above Troy's office. They were in the same building. She had a light brown bob and a wide smile in her LinkedIn photo. She and Troy had apparently been seeing each other for the better part of 10 months. Dwight's folder included photographs, phone records, hotel receipts going back to the previous October, and a printout of a text exchange recovered through entirely legal means that included Amber asking, in late January, "When are you going to tell her?" Troy had responded, "Soon, I promise. Just let me handle it on my own terms." Laurel read that line twice, on his own terms. She thought about what that meant. that she was a situation to be managed, a logistical problem to be handled when it became convenient. She thought about the anniversary dinner she'd eaten alone, watching television assuming he was in the air. She put the folder in her bag, thanked Dwight and drove to her office. She had a client meeting at 2. She got through it fine. That night she told Troy she was thinking about taking a long weekend in Savannah with Odalys. Girl trip. Did he have anything going on that weekend? He checked his phone. I might have something Saturday but I'll figure it out. Great, she said. She called Odalys on the way home from the grocery store the next morning. I need your help with something, she said, and I need you to not ask me questions until I'm done explaining. Odalys was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Okay. The plan took 9 days to set up, which was less time than Laurel had spent designing the load-bearing revisions for a kitchen extension in Druid Hills. She was methodical about it. She knew what she wanted the outcome to look like before she started drawing the lines. Troy's company held a quarterly awards dinner. She had been to the last 3 of them, sitting at the firm table, making conversation with his colleagues' wives, eating the salmon and smiling at the speeches. This quarter's dinner was in 3 weeks. Troy had mentioned it in passing, a Thursday evening thing, the usual crowd. She probably didn't need to come if she didn't want to. She'd said it was fine, she'd be there. He'd looked vaguely uncomfortable in a way that she now understood completely. She went to see Francis again. The process of having divorce papers drawn up, she discovered, was not as dramatic as television made it seem. It was mostly paperwork, very specific paperwork, and it required her to be patient, and she was patient. Francis walked her through everything. Laurel had been working for 11 years, had her own firm, had kept meticulous records of everything she'd contributed financially. The conversation she'd dreaded wasn't actually that complicated, because she had prepared for it the way she prepared for anything. She knew where the load was and she had already reinforced the right walls. She signed what she needed to sign. Francis had the rest prepared for service. She bought a new dress. Not a revenge dress. She thought that concept was a little theatrical, just something she'd been meaning to buy for a while. Deep burgundy, fitted, the kind of thing she wore when she was presenting a finished project to clients. Something that said, I have done the work and I am proud of it. Odalys helped her pick it. Are you okay? Odalys asked, standing in the fitting room of the boutique on Peachtree. I've been better, Laurel said honestly, but I'm going to be okay. Do you want me to come? Yes, but not as backup. Come because you deserve to see this. Odalys had been her best friend for 16 years. She'd been a bridesmaid at the wedding. She'd watched Laurel and Troy build their life together and had never once said anything. Never given Laurel any reason to question, because there had been no reason to question, until there had been, and by then it was already 10 months deep. Odalys held the dress up and nodded slowly. I'll be there, she said. The dinner was at the Whitmore, a hotel event space that Troy's firm used every quarter, chandeliers and white tablecloths and a small stage at one end where they did the awards presentations. Laurel arrived early. She found their assigned seats. She'd confirmed them with Troy's assistant, who had no reason to find that strange, and she sat down and had a glass of water and watched the room fill up. Troy arrived at 6:15, came straight to the table, saw her, and his face did something that she filed away carefully. It recovered in less than a second. He kissed her cheek. Thought you were running late, he said. Traffic was light, she said. He sat down. His eyes moved around the room in a way she recognized now as something other than professional sociability. Amber arrived at 6:22. She was wearing a green dress and came in with a group from what appeared to be her own firm's table. But her seat, Laurel had confirmed earlier that week through a contact who knew one of the event organizers, was 4 tables away with a clear sightline to where Laurel and Troy were sitting. Amber's eyes found Troy immediately. She hadn't looked at the seat next to him yet, then she did. Laurel watched Amber's face. It was informative. Amber looked away. She sat down at her table. She did not look at their table again during the first course. Troy was managing. He was good at managing. She could see that now, how practiced it was, how much energy he put into the performance of being a present, attentive person when something demanded it. He talked about a project he was closing. He asked about her Druid Hills commission. He poured her water without being asked. She let him. She ate her salad. She talked about Druid Hills. She was perfectly pleasant. The awards portion began at 7:45. The managing partner took the stage and started in on the quarterly recognition, project milestones, client retention numbers, an associate who'd brought in a significant account. Troy was receiving the Senior Client Excellence Award, which he'd received before, and which he'd mentioned to her twice in the past month, with the careful casualness of someone who wanted to be acknowledged, but didn't want to appear to be asking for it. His name was called at 8:12. He pushed back his chair and straightened his jacket, and she watched him walk to the stage. She waited until he was at the podium, until the room was quiet and he was holding the award and starting to speak. "I want to thank the team, the partners, the clients who make this work meaningful." And then she turned to the man standing discreetly near the entrance, whom she had spoken with 20 minutes ago, who worked event security for the hotel and had agreed to deliver an envelope to a specific gentleman on stage as part of what Laurel had described, truthfully as a personal matter of some urgency. The man had looked at her for a moment, reading her. She'd met his eyes, he'd nodded and taken the envelope. He walked up the side aisle now, quiet and unhurried, the way professionals move when they don't want to disturb a room. He stepped up to the edge of the stage. Troy, mid-sentence, noticed him. The man held up the envelope with 2 fingers, low and polite. Troy looked at it, looked at the man. The room noticed the pause. He took the envelope. He stood at the podium and he opened it. She watched his face. She had designed this moment very carefully, and now she sat in her seat and watched Troy Beckett read the first page of the divorce, filing with the name of the law firm at the top and the signature line at the bottom, standing at a podium in front of 63 of his colleagues and clients. And she watched everything he had spent 10 months managing dissolve in a single second. He did not move, he did not speak, he just stood there. Someone in the back of the room coughed. Laurel set her napkin on the table and picked up her bag. She stood up, smoothed the front of her burgundy dress and walked toward the exit. She didn't hurry, she didn't look back. At the table near the door she passed Odalys, who had arrived late and taken a seat far enough back to be unobtrusive, and she caught her eye. Odalys stood up. They walked out together. The drive home took 22 minutes. They didn't talk for most of it. Odalys drove because Laurel had decided that in advance, along with everything else. When they pulled into the driveway, Odalys turned off the engine and they sat there for a minute in the quiet. "Okay," Odalys said finally. "How do you feel?" Laurel thought about it. "I feel like I finished a project," she said. "The hard one. The one where you're not sure the walls are going to hold until suddenly they do." Odalys reached over and squeezed her hand. Troy called that night. She didn't answer. He called twice more over the next hour. He texted, "We need to talk, please." She read it and put the phone down and made herself a cup of tea. He showed up at the house at 10:30. She was prepared for this too. She met him at the door, not inside, at the door, and she told him, quietly and without anger, that Francis's office would be his point of contact going forward. He looked like a man who had rehearsed an entirely different conversation for 11 years and now had no lines left. "Laurel, I know about Amber," she said. "I've known for a while. I know about the Marriott downtown. I know about all of it. Francis has the documentation." She paused. "And I need you to hear this clearly, because I mean it. I don't want to fight. I don't want to punish you. I just want this to be over." He stood there. He looked smaller than she'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry," he said, and she thought it might even be true. "I know," she said. "Good night, Troy." She closed the door. She heard, 3 weeks later through the particular information network that exists in every professional community, that Amber had stopped coming to industry events. Apparently the awareness that the wife had been in the room that night had a way of changing the social calculations involved. She'd also heard that Amber had quietly transferred to her firm's Atlanta office from the Midtown location. Whether that was voluntary or not, she didn't know. She didn't spend much time thinking about it. What Amber did or didn't face was between Amber and whoever kept score of those things. What Laurel thought about instead was the small satisfying fact that Amber had known, had been in the room that night, had watched the whole thing from 4 tables away and understood in real time that the wife she'd been a footnote to had been paying attention all along. She thought that was probably enough. The divorce was finalized on a Friday morning in February, which happened to be the same week Laurel's firm won a design award for the Druid Hills project. She found out about the award at 9 a.m. and signed the final paperwork at 11. She took Odalys to lunch afterward at a place in Inman Park with a good wine list and windows that let in the winter light. "To being done," Odalys said, raising her glass. "To being done," Laurel agreed. She moved into a rental in Virginia Highland while she figured out what came next. It was smaller than the house. A clean white apartment on the 2nd floor with good light in the mornings, and a kitchen she immediately rearranged to her own logic. She bought plants. She started running again, the way she'd run in her 30s before work had crowded it out. She called her mother more. She wasn't okay immediately. She wanted to be clear about that when she told the story later. She'd had a hard winter. There were nights when she sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and thought about 11 years and felt the weight of it. Not regret exactly, but grief, which is different. You can grieve something that was also not right. The two things can be true at the same time. But she'd learned something, those months of paying attention, those months of quiet documentation and careful planning. She'd learned that she was someone who could do the hard thing without falling apart in the middle of it. She'd learned that her instincts were reliable, and her patience was an asset, and that she didn't need anyone's permission to protect herself. She'd learned, standing in that hotel ballroom in her burgundy dress while the room went quiet, that the best move she'd ever made wasn't anything she'd designed on paper. It was the decision she'd made in the dark at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. To see clearly, to move carefully, and to trust herself. That was the work. She had done the work, and she was whole.